Ladies and gentlemen, we are live. Hello, everybody. Good evening and welcome. Please come in, take a seat, grab a chair, get yourself a beer or a cup of tea or something, and we'll have a chat about Calc. This is going to be episode 2. And I'm just, by the way, checking the audio just to make sure you guys can all hear me. So let's have a look at that. Skip the ads. There we go. Yes, everybody can hear me. Let's lose that. So, episode 2, guys, of the Calc journey. I've been going for a week now, and what I'm going to start by doing very quickly is showing you my tank, because if you don't know who I am or what my tank looks like, you need to know before you take advice from me. So if I can mess that around, Christ, this is going well. Here we go. So this is my tank. It's been running for 3.5 years. I've pulled corals out. If normally a tank that's been running for 3.5 years is a lot more grown out than this, but it's not, because I pulled corals out when they got too big. Anyway, that is the tank. That's what I'm working with. For those of you who don't know me. So, and I've been working with Calc for an entire 1 week. So first order of business, I am a Calc noob, and I've done a ton of research. I know a little bit about what I'm talking about, but I have no experience. I have a week of experience. So this is following my journey. This is not advice like you get from BRS, from someone who's been doing it for 20 years, for example. Anyway, enough caveats. I'll come to that. In fact, you know what? One last order of business. I bought something the other day, paid for no sponsorship or any commission, any rubbish, and it's just wicked. For these little Hannah holders, little 3D printed Hannah holders, holds the reagent, the little things, all this lot. They're so cool. They're from a company in the UK called Reef parts. I think it was like £15. They're really cheap. I just wanted to share because I think they're awesome. I hate the little black boxes that the Hannah stuff comes in as standard. Anyway, that's not Calc. So let's have a look, and we'll get stuck into Calc. Les is telling me I'm late. My apologies. There must be a whole 30 seconds. Just building the tension, Les. It's drama. It's showmanship. That's what it is. I'm not late. It's just, it's deliberate, all of this time. Evening, all bearded Reef. Ross in the house. Good evening. Welcome along. Plenty of people coming along. And we're going to the Budweiser advert from 20 years ago. What's up? So all good. We've got loads of people in. In fact, quick shout out to my friend from the Budweiser advert who is actually in Austria. Welcome along. And Aquaballs makes a very good point. Smash the like button because YouTube loves that stuff. And Angling Addict is now angling for free coral. So if you're based in Austria, send him some coral. Right, let's have a look and see what else we've got. Anyone else got anything particularly interesting to say? Oh, we've got, straight off the bat, we've got natural seawater. No, Wayne. No, I've not tried natural seawater. Right, anyway, Kalkwasser. So this is my first week of dosing Calc. And I'm going to chuck in a quick spoiler alert to start with. I love Kalkwasser. I think it's absolutely fantastic. And I wish I'd discovered it a long time ago, or I wish I'd started using it a long time ago. But what I'm going to do today is just run you through my first week of dosing Kalkwasser, the things I've got wrong, the things that have gone right, and what effect it's had on my tank, all this sort of stuff. You may remember, if you watched the first episode, that I bought myself a Calc stirrer. It was 80 quid, made by Deltec, and it was secondhand because the Deltec stirrers, brand new, are £400 in the UK, which is crazy money. And I was really chuffed with it. 80 quid, that's a bargain. I tested it, it worked fine. So last week when I went to start Calc, I filled it up with Calc and tested it again. Turns out it's broken. So the stir bar spun for about 20 seconds, which is what happened when I first started it. But after 20 seconds, it just stops. I think it might be because it's got a load of Calc, I don't know, dust or whatever, clogged up in the mechanism. So it might be fixable. But that was a bad start. That was a negative, which means I need 2 positives, one to cancel out the negative and one just to have a positive. So I've abandoned plan A of using a Calc stirrer. And actually, that has meant I'm going for plan B, which is much, much easier and the cheapest and simplest way to do this, which in hindsight is probably the way I should have done it in the first place. All you need to do is find a container, put some RO water in it, and then mix in a couple of grams of Calc powder. That's it. All you do, and then you dose the actual the liquid. It's called saturated calc when you do it that way, and it's really, really easy. And if you're starting your calc journey, don't waste your money on calc stirrers at the start. They are good and they definitely have their place, but just start with a container, chuck some powder in it and mix up. So first week in calc, I started, I think, on Monday night, maybe, or Tuesday night of this week, so 6 or 7 days ago. And I started really slow. Everything you do in this hobby, you've got to start slow, right? So what I did was I started with 200 milliliters of saturated Kalkwasser over the course of something like 2 hours, I think it was. And then I monitored my pH and I checked in to see how it was going. It made no difference whatsoever. Okay, absolutely nothing, not even a wiggle. There was not my KH, my alkalinity didn't change either. I didn't test my calcium because I'm hard. So I don't know about that, but it made no difference whatsoever. So the next night I dosed 500 milliliters over 3 hours. So up to half a liter, extended the time slightly. And that did have a slight effect. I've gone back and looked over my graph, and actually you can't really see it, but it did have some impact. It bumped it up a tiny bit. So after that, given how slow this was going and nothing was happening, I doubled it. I went to 1,000 milliliters, only this time it was over 6 hours. And that got me excited. So excited, in fact, and let me just not skip ahead. So excited that I'm going to show you what happened to my calc. So let's bring that up on screen. So this is my pH monitor. It's an automatic measure. It's a pH probe, basically. So 16th of February. So this is previously. Do you know what? So first thing, last week I said my peak was 8.08 before I started this. And you can see here, my peak was 8.22. And that's the day I started using it, or the day after, something like that. But Calc didn't do that initial bump from 8.08 to 8.22. I switched to ATI Essentials Plus from ATI Essentials Pro, and that gave me a bump, a good bump. So if you're dosing ATI Essentials Pro and you're wondering whether it makes a difference going to ATI Essentials Plus, it does. Quite a significant difference, I would say. But that was that. So this is the 16th of February then. So my trough then was down at 7.8. And this is after I'd switched to ATI Essentials Plus, but before I'd started dosing any real significant amount of calc. So dipped quite low, 7.82. First evening, normally, in fact, if you look over here, the normal peak lasts 2 hours. That's it. Just 2 hours of peak pH in the evening. That's 7 and 8 o'clock, which is basically when my lights are at their strongest. The first day I did a litre of calc over 6 hours. The peak lasted basically 4 hours, 3 hours, and then a tiny bit lower. So the peak lasted much longer. And I started dosing it around 7, 8 o'clock, I think. So instantly, just a litre of the calc had a decent impact, bumped up the peak to 8.24 from 8.22, but more to the point, leveled it off. Good news. And even more to the point, the next morning, my trough had gone up from, 7.82 to 7.94. Whoa. So it's already closed the gap. So that was the first time I actually dosed any significant amount. And I found that it really is, any research you do will tell you that it's weak stuff and you need to dose a lot. No kidding. It turns out that is very much correct. Although I'd still say if you start it, of course, better to start very much as slow as you can do, and don't just jump ahead, because your consumption might not be as much as my tank is. So that was down to one other thing. So I did also I installed a CO2 scrubber probably a couple of weeks ago, about a month or so ago now. It's having very little impact, but it's not impossible that contributed to some of my pH boost. But the media is hardly going down at all. It's hardly being used. I wonder if there might be an air leak between the scrubber and the skimmer. So I don't think that's affecting it. I think we're talking just the Kalkwasser that's doing this stuff. So that was the first time I bumped up to a litre, and it did all right. At that point, and I'm just going to wind back actually, because I've deleted far too much information there. There we go. Yes, and that's actually one point on the ATI Essentials Plus. Having switched to that, and on my tank up here, my main tank, well, my frag tank, sorry, water box frag 55.2. I'd been dosing all four Reef for a while, but a month or two ago, probably 2 months ago now, I switched to ATI Essentials Plus. And all for Reef doesn't boost your pH, ATI Essentials Plus does. And for that reason, I'm not going to use all for Reef again. It's been really popular lately, but actually with all the talk of pH at the moment, I think it's, if you're looking to boost your pH, and if your pH is below 8.3, 8.2, I probably wouldn't use all for Reef. Anyway, I digress. At this point, so I'm 3 or 4 days in, I decided it would be a good idea to measure my evaporation of the tank, because the way Kalkwasser works, of course, is that you've got this RO water basically that you dose into your tank. So you can only add as much Kalkwasser water as you lose to evaporation each day. Effectively, you end up replacing your auto top off, kind of. So I measured it. I should have done this at the start. So if you start Kalkwasser, job one before you start, find out how much your tank evaporates. Then you know your ceiling. Because if your tank evaporates 1 litre in a day and you're adding 2 litres of Kalkwasser, well, your sump's just going to get fuller and fuller and fuller until it overflows. Anyway, I might be teaching you to suck eggs here. So I measured my evaporation about 4 or 5 days in, and I think it was about 5 litres per day. However, I'll come back on to correct that, because actually I think I got the calculation a little bit wrong. The other thing to say, I'm dosing the Kalkwasser from a container to my tank with an Ecotech Versa. Now, they're not available at the moment. I don't know what's going on. It can't just be a chip shortage. There's got to be more to it. But anyway, I think they had some issues with, maybe not recalls, but some issues with the early batches. Either way, I bought this secondhand. It's absolutely fantastic. Some Ecotech equipment I love, some I'm not that keen on. The Versa is brilliant. When they do come back out, they're wicked. Get them. It's dead silent, nice and compact, feels really sturdy and really accurate. I calibrated it because it was secondhand and I bought it from someone else, and it was bang on anyway. So the Versa is really good. One thing I would say. And the other thing as well, because I've got all of these monitoring systems. So last week I showed you kind of all the various automatic testers I have. One of which was the pH meter, but also I've got loads of others. And the ones I mentioned in particular were the Salinity Salinity Guardian, which tells you what your salinity level's at, and also the KH Keeper, which tells you what your alkalinity is at. Really important to say this straight off the bat. You don't need all of them. Hang on a second. Get back here. What's going on? Yeah, really important to say straight off the bat. 1 second. I'm having technical difficulties. My mouse has gone crazy. I can't get my screen back. Come on. What's going on? All right. Well, we're going to have to put up with that for a minute. But it's really important to say right off the bat. Oh, that's what was going on. I was looking at my mouse on the screen, only my mouse was on the other screen, and I'm being an idiot. Anyway, that's the sort of thing your dad does when he can't figure out how to work the computer. So yeah, so it's really important to say you don't need any of that at all. You could argue that you need a pH probe, because this does have a significant impact on your pH. You really don't want to, if your doser got stuck on, dumped a ton of Kalkwasser in, you want to know about it so you can take action quickly. But actually, that's still optional. I don't think you necessarily need it. You don't need a KH monitor, you don't need a salinity monitor, and you probably don't really need a pH meter monitor. You can test all that stuff manually anyway. Your salinity is highly unlikely to change because of this. The only time it would is if you're dosing too much of the stuff and it's dosing more than you'd be evaporating. You don't need that. The KH monitor is very useful, but all you really need to do otherwise is test manually anyway. And pH, what I found is that my pH peaks at the point at which my lights are at their brightest, and it dips just before the lights come back on. So if you were to test at those 2 points on your tank, you'll be able to measure your pH swing pretty much without having to do the monitor. So just get a standard test kit. With that being said, all the test kits, all these additional monitors are fantastic. I really appreciate having them, because I wouldn't be testing anything like as much. I wouldn't have the level of data and the number of results I get. So they are actually really good if you've got the budget for them, but you absolutely don't need it. And Kalkwasser is a budget dosing option, really cheap. So don't think that you've got to spend a couple of £1,000s. There was one comment on the last video where someone said, oh, I'm totting up how much I'd have to spend on this. It's not worth it. I didn't mean to put anyone off. This is just, it's useful to have, but you don't need it. Anyway, so I've done my 1 litre per day. And at that point, I bumped it up, and I bumped up quite significantly, and I got up to about 3.5 litres per day. And I'm now at 4.1 litres per day. And what that has done is it has brought my peak not that much higher, actually, but it's brought the peak from 8.22 to 8.27. That's my pH, 8.22 to 8.27, which is a nice little bump, and I appreciate it, but it's not massive. I do think there's more to come because I've only been dosing 4 litres for the last 3 days. So I think there's going to be a cumulative kind of knock-on effect, but not a huge boost. The real boost, though, has come from my trough. So my trough used to be, immediately before I started this, 7.86. My trough is now 8.04, which is a massive increase, 2 points basically, which is huge. And also, because that gap has shrunk, my swing during the day is now down from 0.36 to 0.25. So that is all. That's the benefit that the Kalkwasser has given me so far. A small bump at the top, not massive, but a small bump, but a big bump at the bottom end to bring up the trough. As I said, I've changed to ATI Essentials Plus, so it's a little bit, which did give me a bump on pH. So it's a little bit difficult to work out exactly what's attributable to the Kalkwasser, but I think those figures I've given you factor in the ATI Essentials anyway. So I think that's right. And by the way, if you're asking questions, I'm going to come on to those in a minute. I want to get all this stuff down so people watching afterwards don't have to watch the whole 2 hours to get the meat of the presentation, for want of a better word. So what else has it done? Another benefit, a couple of people, another benefit you'll see if you research it is that it reduces phosphate. I'm not expecting it to have much of an impact. No one's really committed to anything to say, oh yeah, it'll knock your phosphate down by 20% or whatever. And lately, my phosphate has been relatively high, but it's been high for, I don't know, 2 years, 3 years, long time. But the last month or two, I've been cleaning algae off my glass every other day, really often, and it's been doing my nut in. So I don't know what it is. I think that means that there's probably elevated phosphate, and it's just not registering on the test because corals are absorbing it or algae is or whatever. But anyway, since I've been dosing Kalkwasser this week, there's much less algae on the glass, noticeably so. And I'm probably scraping it off half as much now, once or twice a week, which is really good. So I think it does. I think it is having an effect on phosphate on my tank. Although I have, and actually I've also been feeding quite a lot more because my nitrates bottomed out, set on a separate matter. So I've been feeding more. So that would normally lead to a spike of phosphate, of course. Although I did test my phosphate, it's up to 0.36. And I forget what it was last time, like a week or so ago, but it was probably half that. So it's not having a massive impact on my phosphate, I would say. However, it's given me a really nice boost in pH. It's completely flattened my pH curve. And the best way to show that, actually, let's bring the old pH history graph up. So this was a week ago. This was my pH swing. Look at that. It's huge. It goes all the way up and then all the way down and then all the way up. Massive swing up and down. And one of the key things I was looking for from this, 2 things I wanted from Calc. 1, bump my pH up so it's always above 8.3 ideally and never below 8.3-ish, 8.25, something like that. But 2, to flatten the distance between the peak and the trough. And boy, has it ever done that. I mentioned the figures, but you can see here the peak and trough were huge. Whereas when we scroll across now, this is when the Kalkwasser kicked in. Suddenly the peak and trough is tiny. So it's not going right to the top and the bottom of this graph anymore. It's only going halfway up and halfway down. So the trough, it's a much, much flatter line. Let me see if I can demonstrate that better by going to a month. No, that doesn't really show it. In fact, that shows the exact opposite. Why is it showing the opposite? Let's select a date range. 20th of February to the 1st of February. Will that do it? No, not really. Totally and utterly useless. So anyway, we'll abandon that, but take my word for it. The graph is now much, much flatter. You can probably see that from the first graph I showed you. Forget the second bit. It's a waste of time. It didn't work. So the graph is much, much flatter now. and I've had a pH boost. And it seems to have reduced phosphate insofar as it's doing the best kind of phosphate reducing, causing me less work and causing less algae on the glass. So Calc is absolutely awesome then. You should all go out and do it straight away, and you should crack on and put it on every single tank you've got, right? Well, maybe not. So I want to tell you about the downsides that I've experienced. So first off, apart from the algae on the tank, algae on the glass, I haven't noticed any visible difference to my tank. I did look at a couple of my corals and think they were showing better polyp extension because they're a little bit fluffy, some Acropora tenuises. Tenui, what's the plural of tenuis? And in fact, I'll show you an example of a photo I took today. Let's bring that bad boy up. Up you go, fella. There we go. So this is well, I thought it was a home wrecker. Some people in the States say it's not. Whatever, it's a nice coral. And you can see there's some good polyp extension there, nice and fluffy. However, I did check back to the exact same coral, and I'll see if I can find it, about a month ago to see actually whether it had really made a difference. Because I remember this not being that fluffy. And here we go. So you've not got the images side by side, but that still looks pretty fuzzy to me. Not quite such nice color possibly, but really not a noticeable difference. So I had to look really close to see if it had made a difference to my tank. And I think, in all honesty, I don't think it's early days, it's only been a week. So, you know, turning an oil tanker, isn't it, with a reef tank? So I'm not necessarily expecting it to, but it hasn't made a visible difference to my tank. So all my numbers look better, which is great, but it hasn't made a visible difference. Also, now I'm up to 4.1 litres of calc per day. I'm almost at the limit of my tank. It turns out I don't evaporate 5 litres a day. I evaporate about 4.1. I've been checking every single day when my calc starts dripping, and the water level in my sump is just above the sensor for my auto top off, which means the auto top off isn't kicking in. So I think 4.1 litres is maybe even 100 millilitres or so too much, but certainly it's on the ragged edge. So whilst I've had this nice boost, and whilst it might build to a cumulative effect, I don't think it's going to get much better. And 8.27 today, 8.28 is a lovely level, much, much better than it was a month ago, but it's still shy of where I'd like it to be. I'd like it to be ideally 8.3 100% of the time, but if not, between say 8.2 and 8.4 or 8.3 and 8.4. So I'm now at the limit. I can't put any more in, and it's on my tank, which is relatively high demand, some big enough Acropora colonies. I've reached the limit, and it hasn't actually done as much as I was hoping. So what else? And also, I'm still dosing quite a lot of dosing liquids, my ATI Essentials Plus. It has reduced for sure, but I'm still dosing a lot, so it hasn't replaced that. And the other thing is the elephant in the room with Kalkwasser. And I need to take, I love Kalkwasser, so I need to take a sip of beer because this is like finding out where one of your children has done something that disappoints you. So the elephant in the room is the volume. So I mentioned I was dosing 4 litres of the stuff a day. On my tank with the dosing, with the ATI Essentials Plus, I dose around, before this all started, around 80 millilitres per day of dosing liquids. That could fit in this 100 millilitre container. It's not a urine cup. It's a frag cup. But anyway, a day's worth of dosing liquids can fit in here. A day's worth of Kalkwasser needs this 5 litre bottle. So that's your difference between dosing, normal dosing, like ATI Essentials, Triton, all that sort of stuff, and Kalkwasser. It's huge. So of course, you don't want to store a day at a time, which is more or less what I'm doing. This is a 5 litre tub, and it's what I've been using up till today. I've now managed to fit a 10 litre tub in my cabinet, but that only gives me 2 days. So I'm mixing up a new batch every other day, which is fine at first, but that's not sustainable long term. There's just no way I can be bothered to do that. So realistically, in order to do this properly, unless I get a calc stirrer, which is expensive, or manage to fix my one, unless I get that, I'm going to need to get a big old water container. And I'm talking, I think I worked out that if I had a 100-litre water container, it would, and I'm just trying to bring one up so I can show you the sort of thing I'm talking about. But if I had a 100-litre water container, it would last me, how much was it? It was about 3 weeks. It was 3.5 weeks, I think. And this is the sort of thing I'm talking about. So this is a website called Tanks Direct in the UK. These tanks are wicked, by the way. I've bought one of these for my saltwater mixing tub. We don't get brute trash cans here in the UK. Well, I don't think we do anyway. But anyway, these are all closed. You can seal them, which is important with Kalkwasser. And so I might be getting something like this. The annoying thing with it is it's £83, which is not mega bucks. It's quite expensive, but for 100-litre that is okay. But postage is 30 quid, which is crazy. And it's in Northern Ireland, so I can't just go and collect it. Anyway, so that's really the main issue I find with Calc, or I have found with Calc, is that you need an almighty container. And who's got space for a 100-litre water container in their tank? I'm going to have this in a different room behind my tank and run a long dosing line from it, which is fine, and I've got the space, but it's really not ideal. There's a way around that, and I've been talking to Jim Graham, Telegram, who does live streams on his channel at Telegram, or Telegram if you're American, and he's been doing Calc Slurry for about 9 months, which is much more potent, and I can't remember the sums he told me, but basically it's about 10 times as potent. So instead of 4 litres a day, I'd need 400 millilitres a day. I'm still not brave enough to do that just yet, but I'm interested in it because I feel like my tank needs more of a boost of pH than saturated Calc can give me. So that is all the downside, really. There are a couple of downsides, mainly the size, but also it hasn't actually had an impact on my tank as yet. Again, early days, and I'm still having to dose dosing liquids. And also, and in fact, I'll show you my dosing history. And also, you need an almighty vat. So it's not a perfect solution at all. I still really like it. And if you've got space, it's wicked. And it might be better. This is a high demand tank. If you've got a low demand tank, and the tank next to me, my frag tank, is much more low demand, then you only need a small container, maybe 25 litres, which is a foot cube, maybe, not that big. That's doable. One of those water barrels you can get for 25 litres, they would work. So it's not necessarily a no in terms of space and capacity. If you've got a small tank, they're great. I mentioned KH then, and my KH consumption, and the fact that I'm still dosing. Here is my KH graph. It's been testing every 2 hours. And you can see, really interestingly, that here it is, 8 p.m., which is where when my Kalkwasser starts dosing, that graph slowly goes up. Oh, it keeps going up and up and up and up and up until 12 o'clock. And I think it's either 12 or 1 o'clock. Yeah, I think it's 1 o'clock, in fact, that I stopped dosing Kalkwasser. So it goes up and up and up and up because it's increasing, and then it goes down and down and down and down. So I do need to adjust my dosing levels to factor that in. So I'm dosing less overnight, and I've already bumped it down a little, but it's still having it, and then a bit more during the day. So there's a bit of messing around with you. To be fair, that's fine. There's not a massive swing in the KH, so I'm probably overthinking it, to be fair, but I feel like I want it to be flatter. But it has had an impact on my KH, and you can see from that graph, and I'll put it up again whilst I'm saying this, you can see from that graph that from 8 o'clock when I start dosing it, it goes up and up and up and up and up. So therefore, for a fact, it is increasing my alkalinity to a fair old degree, and that's a 0.4 boost in alkalinity at a time when my corals probably aren't uptaking that much. So not a huge amount, but a reasonable amount. So those are that's basically my experiences so far with this stuff. And like I say, I'm now at the point where, oh yeah, actually, one last thing on the dosing liquids. So when I switched over to ATI Plus, ATI Essentials Plus, I was dosing about 75 mil per day. Now I'm dosing 50 milliliters per day. So what's that? It's a 1/3 drop, something like that. And I'm actually just going to check to make sure I've not changed that again since. But it's a small drop in the amount of dosing liquids that I'm using. Now, I don't really care about that. On a 45 mils, I'm down to from, what did I say, 75. So not a bad drop. I don't really care about that. I'm not doing it to save money on dosing liquids, but just I thought it was an interesting observation nonetheless. So basically, that is my first week of Kalkwasser. It's wicked, and it's given me a real boost of pH, but I feel like my tank has already reached its limit in terms of what Kalkwasser can do for me. Might bump up a tiny bit more, but not an awful lot. And while it's flattened my my diurnal dip, my curve, I feel like I want more, which is why I'm going to come on to other things. But I am going to start it on my second tank as well. Much fewer corals in there, and I think by my calculations, I'll need less than a litre per day, which is fine, and I can do that very easily. And I think it should have a nicer boost. I've been using, for this to monitor pH for the frag tank, I've been using a Senai Reef I've just connected, but it's the software is a bit clunky and it's awkward, and it's doable, but it's not great. So that's basically it. Let's catch up with the chat and see how it's going. And what I should say, by the way, is I'm not, although I've given you like the ups and downs of Calc, the goods and the bad, overall, I still think it's brilliant. And I feel at this early stage, admittedly only a week in, I feel at this early stage as though I'm always going to use the stuff, because I think it's, well, the juice is worth the squeeze, 100% for me. It's just that it's not a perfect solution, and there are compromises, which is the same with everything in life, right? So anyway, let's go back and see what everybody else is saying. And there's bound to be a load of comments because I do this stupid thing where I don't read comments as I go along. Oh, Angling Addict, who I was saying is in Austria, is actually British. Congratulations. But I still can't send you any corals. Stop obsessing about pH and water your plant. Dave, it is a disgrace, isn't it? Which side is it? Is that one? That is, this was only a week ago. That was looking great. And this is really rustly because it's basically dead. My missus promised me she was going to get me a new plant this weekend, but she let me down. So it's not my fault. It's someone else's fault. Never my fault, Dave. But yes, very good. So we've got a few questions about various things like advice on setting up tanks, GSP and all that sort of stuff. I'm going to skip over that because this is just about Kalkwasser today. If I get time at the end, we'll talk about other stuff, but I really want this just to be mainly about Calc. So let's have a look. Here we go. So Sammy D, this is the 13-year veteran of Calc from last week, if you remember. Been chasing pH in a different way, added an extra hour of ramping. Okay, gained 0.2, which is quite high on the low end, and high end just with that on soda ash. So I've tried to extend my ramp. I've tried to set my ramping period to start before the peak and finish after the trough. So it kind of, it doesn't have to work quite so hard. So it's still peaking as I start dosing Kalkwasser, but I might try playing around with the ramping period. Actually, we'll see. I've not nailed this at all by any chance. I'm a week in. I've only been dosing the full amount for 3 days. But yeah, interesting point. Thanks, Sammy. I'll give that a bash. What else have we got? Interested to see this. Been dosing Red Sea, no pox, but dropped my pH to 7.4. Wow. Wonder why I did that. Carbon dosing. Anyway, a few weeks despite weekly water change. So looking forward to your results. Well, you know the results now. So look forward no more. K20 charged mini. Oh, a supercharger. You're a car man. Okay, so let's have a quick look. We've got more hellos and hello everybody. Welcome along. Reef Dog, Sammy. Sammy, you're the main man here. You're getting all the airtime. Have you tracked your pH with your lighting schedule? How many hours of lighting are you running? So yes, I have. I've already answered that question, and I suspect you asked this a long time before I did. But that's a good point. And I'll bring up my lighting schedule so I can show you. And this is Evergrow. I have Evergrow lights, which are the kind of the king of the Chinese black box lights, if you will. And for whatever reason, I can't increase that. So can I not increase that? Come on. All right, we're gonna have to make do. So I'll show you what it is though. So my lights they come on at 10. It's about 10:05 they come on in the morning, and then at here it is 1 o'clock is when they peak. So I have a couple of hours, a few hours of ramping up, and then bang, there at the emboldened part of this from 1 to 7 is when they're at their peak. They stay that long for, what's that, 6 hours, is it? Yeah, 6 hours. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 7 hours. So 7 hours that they're at the peak. And then after that, oh, hello, what's going on here? After that, they start dipping down and ramping down from 8 o'clock onwards until about 10:15, something like that, when they die off completely. And yeah, you're absolutely right. Well, this isn't the point you're making, but what I did find was that my lighting schedule almost exactly matched my pH dip, which makes sense because as your lights go up, your corals photosynthesize more, they take more CO2 out, therefore your pH goes up. And I did find that really interesting because it means that all you need to do is test your pH at the peak of your lights and when they come on in the morning, and then you'll know your swing. In theory, anyway. I'm basing this on one tank, but I think that's probably likely to be the case for most people. Has my alk gone down? Answered that already. Yes, it has, but not a massive drop. Oh, well, dosing gone down, sorry. Not a massive drop, to be fair. So, and I might have expected more. So there we go. Sammy D again, the main man here. What I want to know is why I can't just plumb my ATO into a calc stirrer reactor and just let the saturated calc flow into my ISO. Why is it? Yeah, you can. So that was my original plan from last week, was to use a calc stirrer and then just feed the calc stirrer for my ATO. Nice and easy. I top up the ATO reservoir every week, so there's no more maintenance. And I might still go back to that because that's one of the ways to save. The problem with calc, of course, is that you need these enormous containers. But one of the ways to avoid that is using a calc stirrer. Then you only need a small cylinder, and that's it. So that might be the answer for me because it saves me space. But I like the simplicity of just using a container with saturated calc. But I think that probably is the answer, to be fair. And I'm going to see if I can fix my calc stirrer. And if not, I might even consider buying one, a new one. Aquaballs asks, is it best to dose Kalkwasser when your lights are on or off? I've chosen to dose it when my lights are off because that's when the dip starts, which is for the reasons I've explained. And the reason I wanted to do that was because I wanted to get the difference between the peak and the trough as small as possible. But I would be interested to see what happens and if your trough actually doesn't go down as it would do otherwise if I was dosing during lights on. I don't know. I feel like that would supercharge my pH during the day and then it would super drop overnight. But it would be interesting to see, and I might give that a bash. Who knows? Are you dripping it 24/7? Andy, I'm not dripping it 24/7. It's about, I think it runs for about 15 hours a day. And it doesn't run between about 1 p.m, midday, something like that, and 8 p.m. So there's a period of something like 6, 7, 8 hours when it's not dripping. And again, I might change that and see if it helps having it 24/7. This is my theory to flatten the curve and all that sort of stuff, but might play around with it and see how I get on. What do you call a high? So in terms of pH, my high is, 8.28 at the moment. Ideally, I'd like my high and my low to be 8.3. Nice and simple, flat line. But realistically, I think that's probably unlikely. So if my high was around 8.4, maybe a little bit higher, I'd be okay with that, as long as the trough isn't too much below 8.2. I don't know. Ideally, not too much below 8.3. So there we go. You get more control dosing calc rather than using a calc stirrer. I think if you get a good calc stirrer, that's not so much of an issue, and it can still drip at a nice steady rate. But I think from what I've seen, when the calc stirrers clog up a little bit, they can slow down and lose efficiency. But anyway, but there we go. That's possibly a valid observation, in that maybe calc stirrers aren't 100%. There's always a downside. Nothing's perfect, is there? So maybe calc stirrers lose a bit of accuracy over time. To be honest, I think as long as it doses around 4 liters a day, I don't really care if it bumps it up and down every hour. It doesn't really matter. It's so insipid and watered down that it's not going to make a huge difference, I think. So that personally wouldn't bother me. But there we go. So in theory, A&K coral. So in theory, if you dose the calc from your top off, you save on the auto top off reservoir having to be refilled. Yeah. So where you're dosing from your calc reservoir, have you managed to locate in a cabinet? So yeah, the Calc reservoir is in the cabinet, but it's a 10-litre reservoir, so it's tiny, and I don't have much more space. I don't think I could fit any bigger container in there. My auto top-off reservoir has gone down almost nothing, probably nothing, in fact, in this whole week. It's been completely full. And I could then, this auto top-off reservoir is about 50 litres. So what I could do is flip it, have a 10-litre auto top-off reservoir, and use my existing 50-litre auto top-off reservoir as my Calc reservoir. It's just that would still only last me a week. And my ATO reservoir is quite big and heavy. It's made of glass, so it'd be a faff to clean. So I'm not sure that's the answer. But there we go. Seems like artistic spaz. Seems like a lot of work for minimal results. I don't agree. It's not that much work if you do it well. So if you've got, i.e., if you've got a big container, at the moment, I'm topping up my container every other day and having to mix a bit of powder every day. It doesn't take long, but it's a pain, and I wouldn't bother doing it. So if you were doing that manually all the time, a couple of times, 3 or 4 times a week, yeah, it wouldn't be worth it. But as far as I'm concerned, the results have been pretty damn impressive, actually. Well worth the effort if you can get it so you've got either a big container that you only have to fill up once every 3 weeks, because that's fine, or maybe a calc stirrer that takes a lot less maintenance. So my take is that actually the results are really, really impressive. And I won't be stopping it, despite the fact that it's a bit of a faff. What I'm going to try to do is tweak the other end and make it less of a faff. Let's keep going. We've got a lot of chat and amongst yourselves, which is, so that might mean that I missed some of the comments, but I'll catch as many as I can. Andy, exactly what I said in my Calc vid. It's just not practical for the vast majority of reefers. I think you'd only just started. I watched that last week, actually, after you mentioned it. So this guy's got on the channel, the Opinionated Reefer. He's done a video of his Calc journey, effectively setting up Calc. But I think you found that it wasn't worth the effort, and you did a DIY Calc stirrer that you couldn't get accurate enough. For me, I've had really good results, or what I consider to be good results. So I think it is worth the effort. It's just, as I say, I think it's about reducing the effort rather than abandoning this. Rubbermead make brute trash cans in the UK. Purchase 2 for that. Wicked. Okay, that's good to know. Well, I don't have space for it, so that's one of the reasons I want one of these tanks, direct tanks, because they fit. They come in all sorts of sizes, so you can fit them in spaces where you've got good space for them. They're just expensive for what they are, really. Wonder water, yeah. So the size of the container was a concern for you. You were curious to see how much you'll need. That's a faff. You always need a place for that container, yeah, for sure. And it's worth pointing out again that my tank is, I think, quite high demand. And if I were to do it on my frag tank, I did a video on the frag tank, by the way, if you don't know what I'm talking about, on Friday, my most recent video. It's a water box, 2 foot cube, basically a little bit shallower. And I'm going to set up for that. I think I'll need a much, much smaller container. I think it will have a bigger impact. And I think it will be worth it on that. It's just, or it will have more of an impact on that, but it doesn't have so much of an impact on a big tank like this, which is not the only thing that you can use. I think you'll need more on top of it. Water butt. A&K Coral says you can get blue water butts, 120 litres, designed for foodstuffs on Amazon you have 2 for top-ups. So the water butts you get in B&Q and Homebase are not designed, they're not food safe. So it's interesting to know that those ones are. But again, I need something that's the right dimensions. That's the key thing for me, because I've only got a certain space for it. But anyway, Garth says, I would never leave more than a few days of Calc available to the doser. Interesting. So in case it dumps it all in, I think that's a really low possibility of a risk. It does happen. I've seen people have dosers get stuck on, but I think the chances are minimal. And especially if you've got a pH monitor that will send you an alert, you can catch it. So I don't think that's, I think that's too cautious. But again, everyone's got different attitudes to risk. And it's a valid point that theoretically, if your doser got stuck on and bunged in, if you had a 100-litre vat, it chucks all that in, you're going to have a problem. Quick diversion from Calc, because it's kind of related. Thoughts on the KH Keeper Plus? I've done a video on it. It's wicked. It's a significant upgrade to the standard KH Keeper, and I still have that on my frag tank, but it's really good. Runs like a dream. It's great. So Yeah, John Doe. So you can blow a fan across your water to evaporate more, and I've seen that's kind of one of the ways of increasing the amount of calc you can get in. You could also put another power head in and aim it at the surface, either in the sump or in the main tank. That for me is, I think if I'm having to do that, I'm stretching it, and it's not. I don't want to do that. Basically, that will also mean that your heaters will be on more, which isn't a big deal, but I don't want to get to the point where I'm on the absolute edge of what I can do and squeeze in a tiny bit extra. If it made another, I don't know, 10% difference, I'm not that bothered about that personally, but it's a fair point. And if you could do it practically, I wouldn't be able to fit a fan on mine that can do that sort of thing very well. I struggle with that in the summer. But if you could do it, then yeah, maybe. Maybe that's worth exploring. What happens? Artistic Spaz says, I'm going to stop reading your name out because it feels a bit politically incorrect to be honest. Anyway, what happens if you stop adding calc? Will the tank take a nosedive? No, not at all, because it's so gentle. And in my case, anyway, I'm still dosing liquids. It won't have much difference, and I'll spot it as long as you're testing calcium, no alkalinity, you'll be fine. And it's the same as if you stop dosing your dosing liquids. Your KH will drop, but it's cool. You can catch it. It's no problem. But yes, it will do. And Justin Moore points out, yeah, it will reduce it, but it's not. That's not an issue if you ask me. Recognize, you say, all for Reef save you the trouble. All for Reef, I've gone off that massively since I discovered that it doesn't increase your pH, and since BRS, Chris Meckley, et al. Have been banging on about pH and have kind of opened my eyes a bit to it, to be honest. And some of my kind of reefing gurus, my reefing mentors. Reef, it doesn't boost pH. It's very expensive as well. I started using it on my my frag tank, and it was fine, but I wouldn't go back to it again now, personally. So that's my take on that. It's not as bad. It's really popular still, but whatever. Let's have a look. What's this? Alfredo raised dose. I had a pH 7.5 to 7.8. Wow. I managed to bring it to 8.3 to 8.5 with sodium hydroxide. So that is the spicy stuff that they use in the BRS have been talking about this in Fight Club to burn like stuff on your hand, isn't it? Really not carcinogenic. It's quite caustic is the word I'm looking for, isn't it? But yeah, sodium hydroxide does appeal to me. I just think it's probably a little bit dangerous, and I don't want to have that in my house in case my missus opens it and tries to make a cake out of it or whatever. It's not going to do that, of course, but I'm not so keen on sodium hydroxide. I love the idea, but I don't know. I think it's a bit too spicy, a bit too rich for my blood. But I'm interested by it for sure. Mini dosing in box, blah 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 blah. How much calc do you dose in one day? 4 liters. Answered that. We need a new video. I had to set up a doser. Piece of cake. Depends what doser you've got. Read the instructions. Really, really easy. You just turn it on, plug it in, and then set it. M&M's Reef is thinking of putting it in your ATO and dosing it all day every 15 minutes via your doser. It'll clog up your ATO pump from what I've seen, and that's probably not the best way of doing it. So I wouldn't do that personally. But yeah, it is one way of doing it. How do you implement Kalkwasser in a small tank if you have little evaporation? Battery exhausted. Oh no. Right, I think you guys can still hear me, which is good. But I'm just going to switch over to the camera. There we go. I'm back. I think we're all good. Am I still here? Can you still hear me? Let me just have a look. So I was doing a test today. Yeah, I'm still live. I can see I'm still live. Great. I was doing a test today to see if my battery would last long enough to do a whole live stream, and the answer, it turns out, is no. I can't tolerate this poor excuse for a camera, though, partly because it's showing my microphone and ruining the illusion. So I'm going to switch back, but give me 1 second, and we'll be right back. Here we go. We're back in business. So let me just change over the camera again. Camera, Camlink. Ta-da! Oh, and now I've got the stupid box. That's really annoying. All right, I'm going to bin that off. and go back to this camera. So here we go. Let me just see if I can't move that out of the way so you can't see the microphone, because no one wants that kind of unprofessionalism. There we go. So apologies for the interruption. So how do I implement Kalkwasser in a small tank if I have little evaporation, or should it be independent of evaporation? No, it's completely tied to evaporation, so that matters massively. And if you've got, it depends. If you've not got many corals in there and you don't have a big demand on alkalinity, it doesn't really matter. But the more evaporation, the better, and that gives you a bit of headroom when you need to increase it. So there you go. Telegram, yeah, GN Zake. Telegram pegged his pH at 8.3 with a controller. That was a GHL controller, which was very impressive, I thought. I really, I quite like that. I've got a lot of time for that. Yeah, I'm hoping to get Telegram on the live stream at some point to talk about Kalkwasser and talk about his slurry method, because I'd like to know more about it. I'm just not, I don't know, it feels a little bit too risky for me, as I think that's kind of my main concern with it. But I don't know, I'm definitely interested, and it's something that I can see myself doing. And if I could peg it at 8.3 like that, like he's done, then yeah, absolutely. Wicked. I've got rid of the box. We're back to professionalism. Cool. So yeah, he's done that. If you don't know who Telegram is, go and check out his channel. That's how you spell it, Telegram. It's live stream only, so they're all long videos, but they're interesting stuff. And like I say, I'm really looking forward, or hoping I'll be able to get him on the stream. He's up for it. It's just a matter of finding time. So he'll be a good one to get on. How many grams of calc per 1 litre of water? Puss check. I can't remember. It says on the instructions. I think it was 3 grams for 4 litres. So what's that? 0.75 grams? 0.75? Yeah, 0.75 grams per litre of water. So a tiny, tiny amount. And the good part of that is that you get through hardly any. So it's dirt cheap. So cheap. If you want to dose your tank and you want to do it as cheap as possible, Kalkwasser is the answer. Straight up. No shadow of a doubt. No question about it. Does the ocean, Wonderwater asks, have a steady pH day and night? Don't think so. Do you know what? I was thinking the exact same thing the other day, and I googled it. I gave up really quickly, but I couldn't find the answer. I think all the answers were on reefing forums. I thought it was funny because everybody's asking the same question that you and me are asking. I think I reckon it probably does actually. But I don't know. Maybe I'm underestimating just how much CO2 algae and corals and all that sort of stuff pull out. Maybe it doesn't. I've got no idea. I've just always assumed it doesn't, but I don't really know, to be completely honest with you. Kevin Clasher 3 says, running a refugium with the lighting opposite light schedule than your tank will keep your pH from fluctuating. To a point, yeah, to a tiny point. And actually, one thing I did notice, because my nitrates had dropped out, I tried to reduce my lighting on my refugium. So I turned one of the lights off. This was about a week and a half ago. I turned one of the 2 lights off. So that was down from 22 watts of light to 11 watts. And I reduced the photo period by about 4 hours. And it dipped from the bottom previously was 7.7. After I turned the light off, it went down to 7.65. So I turned it back on and it bumped back up again. So it does have a difference. It does make a difference. In my experience, at least, not a huge difference. And you need a lot of light for it to make a big difference. But it's absolutely worth doing. And that's one of the reasons people have refugiums. It's one of the reasons I like refugiums for sure. So there we go. Yeah, Puthcheck, your water will evaporate. Your water evaporation will increase over British summertime. I can never remember if it increases or decreases. And I always wonder, but I don't keep records of it. But that's interesting. So if that is the case, then that's great. The only thing with that, what I wanted from this, and this was, expectation versus reality, I wanted to be below the maximum. So if my maximum is 4 litres, ideally I'd have been dosing about 3 litres and to keep it that way all throughout the year. So I never have to change, never have to worry about it. I don't really want to be bumping it up when the weather gets warmer and then when the weather gets colder, monitoring the level of water in my sump and all that sort of stuff. A bit too much faff. But yeah, British summertime, maybe I'll be able to bung more calc in. Although I think by that point, and we're 3 months away maybe from summertime, although summertime in UK is 3 days in July basically. But by that point, I'll still be dosing Calc, but I might have graduated onto Calc Slurry or something else. I don't know. We'll see. Sammy didn't know All for Reef didn't raise pH. Nor did I. It's one of the BRS videos. I'm obsessed. I don't just make videos for YouTube. I'm obsessed with YouTube. I watch so much. It's unbelievable. And I watch all of the BRS stuff, or all the main channel anyway. And yeah, they've talked about this stuff loads. And they said it's calcium formate, which doesn't increase pH. They did a video recently where they showed what dosing supplements increase it most and what increase it least or don't at all. Interestingly, the Red Sea dosing liquids, the liquid form stuff, and I think I've got this the right way around, liquid form stuff has a significant boost, or certainly a decent level, whereas the dry powder stuff that you mix yourself doesn't boost it. You would think it was the same, but it's not. But go back, if you've not seen that video, anybody, go and check it out. Go and dig around for it on the BRS website, YouTube channel, and you'll see which dosing liquids increase your pH and which don't. I can tell you from personal experience that ATI Essentials Pro does not increase it as much as ATI Essentials Plus. And I was really pleasantly surprised with that. So have you thought of also your plumbing, your skimmer to pull your air outside? I have, yeah, absolutely. I've had to settle for pulling it through a CO2 scrubber instead, because it would have to run through about, well, probably not 10 meters, but at least 5 meters of tubing to get outside. And I think that would probably be working too hard. So I've thought about it, but I've not done it. And to be fair, it should have a similar impact through a CO2 scrubber, and I'm not getting that. So I need to play around with that, because I think I've probably not set it up properly on this one. Or maybe there's a leak in the skimmer, one of the tubes somewhere, so it's not pulling all the water through my CO2 scrubber. I don't know. But yes, that is a way of doing it, so for sure. Wonderwater says, you're talking to someone else, but you're saying that your tank stays 7.8 and coralline is growing. It's probably going up and down. It's funny that no stony corals as yet. So I don't know if that's a new tank. I found with my water box tank, when I set it up, I had my pH monitor on that because I wasn't really using it until recently. And I found my pH was pegged pretty much at 8.3. It hardly dipped at all. And I've stopped monitoring it, so I don't know if that's still the case now. I suspect not. But I found before I had many corals in, it was bang level, which was really good. But that's one thing. So coralline is growing. And this is one thing with all of this, is that I've no doubt whatsoever that elevated pH to the point of 8.3 or thereabouts is very much a good thing. But it's not like, and this is the reality of it, when I've said it makes no difference to your tank, it's another thing that don't expect this to be the solution to all of your problems. It's very much a good thing. It will probably strengthen your corals, all sorts of benefits that I don't know. I can't tell you, but don't expect it to be the solution to everything and the silver bullet. There's no such thing in this hobby. And this is no difference. Really good question, NM. Does the KH Keeper track your pH too, so you don't need the pH tester? The answer is yes and no, unhelpfully. And I'll bring up my my Smart Reef panel again. Oh, there's a cheeky little glance at my email address. Going to get a load of spam now. So yeah, so here is the KH Keeper. This is the KH Keeper Plus. It's the same on the KH Keeper, the standard KH Keeper though. But the KH Keeper Plus is a better example because I test every 2 hours. Because the standard KH Keeper is noisy, so I only want it to test twice a day. The KH Keeper Plus is silent, test as much as you like. So here is the pH reading. Now I calibrated the pH probe at a different time on the KH Keeper to the actual pH probe, but I'm pretty sure they're roughly accurate. And you will notice that here, the peak, and I'll scroll down so you can see further, peak is around 8.18, whereas the peak on the probe shows 8.28, 8.29, something like that. And someone asked me before, well, which one do you trust then? Without a shadow of a doubt, you trust the pH meter. That sits in your tank, sits in your sump, and its job is designed to measure your pH in your tank. This sucks water slowly through a meter of tubing, drips it into a beaker, spins it and and then tests it. And its sole job is to measure the drop in pH from point A to point B when you're adding acid reagent. So that is doing a different job, and it will give you a very rough idea. But for me, if you really want to know what your pH is, it'll give you an indication on the KH Keeper. But Reef Factory actually I saw on their Facebook page, they were a little reluctant to add that because it's not what it's designed to do. And now they have done because everybody wanted it, and it's a useful indication, but it's not a substitute. When I first saw that, I thought it was going to be a substitute for the pH meter, and now I know it is very much not. And a pH probe is a much more accurate way of doing it. So can get a rough idea, but it really is a rough idea. Just look at it as a bonus of the KH Keeper rather than a proper tool. Brightwell Aquatics Calc +2 has mag and trace elements. I'm using ATI Essentials Plus, and I'm extremely happy with it. I've been using ATI for years, and I really like it. So I've got no intention of changing that. But there you go. There are loads of options. What else? Let's catch up a bit. I fished you. Reef Talk. Just curious, in your mind, what would have been the optimal results you could have hoped for after 1 week? After 1 week, that feels like a loaded question, but it probably isn't. After 1 week is the crucial part of that. Really, I didn't expect to have got this far after a week, to be completely honest. I didn't think I'd be up to the point where I'm dosing my maximum evaporation every day. I thought it would take ages. I only got that far because it had such a tiny impact that I felt safe in chucking in a load. So expectations, actually, this is ahead of my expectations. The difference is that although I think that there's going to be some kind of cumulative effect, because I've only been dosing it 3 days, when the pH has only been dropping to 8.05 or whatever it is for a month, instead of having to work really hard to get up from 7.7, after a month or so, maybe I'll find that actually it keeps bumping up a tiny bit. I'm maybe 10%. I don't think I've got everything out of it, but I don't expect a massive amount. So this is better than I would have hoped for. But the reason I've got a tinge of disappointment is that I'm already at the maximum amount I can dose. And I thought when I got to that stage, which I didn't think would be this early, but I thought when I got to that stage, maybe 2 or 3 weeks in, it would be higher. And I thought one of the key things I wanted was 8.3. I had that in my head, got to be 8.3 or above. I didn't want my peak to be below 8.3, and it's now 8.28. Yesterday it was 8.27. Today it's 8.28, so maybe it'll go to 8.3. But a very good question I fished to you, and that's kind of my answer. But I am slightly disappointed by it. I still think it's wicked, and I love old. One of the things with this is a load of people, old school reefers use this. And if you watch any old school reefer, they talk about Calc. They dose Calc all the time. Old school people are the ones you want to listen to, not newbies like me who got into the hobby after metal halides and all that sort of stuff. I say newbie, 8 years, so not a total newbie, but relatively. But there you go. Life. I dose 40 ml Calc and 25 ml Alpha Reef per day. Red Sea Reef corals are exposed to the growing out of the water. Wicked. Very good. Evaporation. Yeah, Amir reiterates that evaporation decreases during the summer. See, now I don't know what to believe. I'm just going to wait and see what happens. But who knows? This is the thing. It's one person says it goes up. One person says it goes down. And this is the thing this is why I wanted to try Calc, because one person will say it's rubbish, one person will say it's wicked. So try it yourself. Don't just take my word for it. I'm saying Calc is wicked. Try it yourself. Find out. Is there any point buying a stirrer if you move to Slurry? Steph, fine point. No, it would be wasting 400 quid. And I really don't want to. Well, I guess probably I could sell it for 200 quid. So wasting 200 quid, but still, it's a lot of money. If I can fix my stirrer, that's perfect, because then it's only cost me £80 and I can get that working. But I don't know. I might have to replace the motor. I went looking for a spare part motor on the Deltec website, but it didn't have one. I'm checking my battery now because I'm getting paranoid. Loads of juice. Wicked. I've gone for an uprated external battery. Anyway, you don't want to know about that. So maybe there's not. And the other thing is, if I get a container, about £100, so it's still a lot of money. But I'd rather waste £100 than £400. So maybe the answer is to go for a bigger container for now rather than a stirrer if I can't get mine going. But I'm not necessarily going to move to Slurry. I need persuading. And I don't think I've seen the main man in the house, Jim, tonight. No, I haven't. But I need persuading. I don't really understand exactly how it works. With Kalkwasser, normally you stir a bit of powder into some water, you pour it in your tank. That's it. With the slurry, my understanding is that you put a load of calc, a ton of calc that's far too much for it to saturate, into a bucket, put a couple of powerheads in there, stir it up constantly, and then you dose that. So you're not only dosing saturated calc, you're also dosing some of the powder that hasn't dissolved and the sludge, the slurry, effectively. So that's my understanding. But there are various things that I don't understand, and I want to know exactly how it works before I throw myself in. I want to know the risks as well, because in life, everything, there are some things that are positive, and there are pros and cons of everything, is what I'm trying to say. So I want to know everything about it, which is why I want to get him on the channel and put him under the what's it called, under the microscope, and ask him questions, because he's been doing it for a long time and knows a lot about it. So I think he'd be a wicked guest. Sammy D makes an excellent point. 103 viewers, 122 now. Hit the like button. Keep going. You reckon it's 6 grams per gallon? It's 3 grams per gallon, or 3 grams per 4 liters, which I think is a US gallon, on my on my instructions anyway, which I think is correct. Sammy D's getting mad. No one's hitting the like button, and he's calling you all bots. I like Sammy. You should come on the show. You're quite a funny guy. Anyway, Alfredo. So this guy is, for those of you who don't know him, you have a YouTube channel, I believe, right? And you are based in, I want to say Portugal, but possibly Spain. And you have an Xepta autobalance, Shepta autobalance, however it's pronounced, that you've done a detailed review on. And this guy, the impression I get is that he knows his stuff. So Alfredo, tell us more. But this is really interesting though. pH in shallow areas of the reefs vary a lot from day to night. That makes sense, because as long as there's not the water coming in and going out, then it's a smaller body of water to be affected by photosynthesis, all that sort of stuff. But interesting to know. And here we go, more people piling in on the evaporation. Evaporation is more during the winter than the summer. There we go. 2 days in July, says Doug, and that's British summertime. Sorry, it's not 3 days. You're quite right. It's 2 days. We're currently in the middle of a storm here, for those of you who don't know. Or it's gone now, but there were 120 mile an hour winds last night. Loads of power outages. Fortunately, I wasn't affected, but I feel for you if you've had power outages and panicking that your tank's going to go west. Glenn Owen, when testing, are you taking 5 readings and then using the average? I wonder if you're talking to me. 5 readings, 5 testing what? I don't take averages. No, if I'm testing alkalinity, I just let the KH keeper do it. It's accurate enough. It might not be 100% accurate, by the way, but if it's within half a DKH, which it definitely is, it's fine. Don't really care beyond that. And pH, no, it measures it. It tells me, it records it every hour, but I can check in anytime I want on the app and just go and have a look and see what's what. But you might not be talking to me, to be fair. This is like a weird segue for Matt Edwards. You must be talking to someone else. I was thinking of drilling a hole in the floor. Oh no, it's not. You're not talking to someone else. This is for your skimmer. I was thinking of also, instead of going outside, running an airline to the room next door, because my tank is in my living room, which is where me, my missus, and my cat sit breathing all night. And if it was in the room next door, there's less CO2. But I think that's probably a waste of time. But I don't know. I thought it might be worth trying. Outdoors, if you can run it outside, that's a better way of doing it. I've seen people crack on and do that, to be fair. So, Doug from Fag Farm has pH news. You will get a big increase in your pH if you want to fan across the surface of your tank. Corals live outside, and the wind has a big effect on gas exchange. It will increase pH. I've never monitored pH when I've had my fan on, to be fair. But the trouble with the fan, I can't. When in the summer, I put a massive tower fan, rest it on top of my aquarium, because that's the only thing that I find makes a difference. The little weedy hobby fans, I'm not a huge fan of. But yeah, it's worth trying, I guess, and that would increase my evaporation, I suppose. So maybe do a video to show the difference a fan makes. Nah, I can't be bothered with that. It would be a lot of effort, and no one would watch it, quite frankly. What else have we got going on? Can you take water from your tank? Right, let's read this up. Can you not use your water from your tank to pump into the 100-litre tank? Use water from your tank to pump into the 100-litre tank and keep adding calc to that to dye and keep your ATA water separate. I'm not quite sure I understand what you mean there. Add water from your tank to the 100 to pump into the 100-litre tank. Other way around, isn't it? I don't understand. Sorry, I'm not following that. But you followed up. Can you not put salted RO, salt water in the 100-litre tank and add calc to that, so they're not reliant on evaporated water? Nice try, no cigar, because the point of the evaporated water is that your water level sits in your sump like that. When you evaporate water, it drops, so you replace it. If you're replacing it with salt water, your salinity level won't change, but your sump water level will keep going up and up and up, and then suddenly you'll have a flood in your living room, and you'll have a wet dog and an unhappy missus. So no, unfortunately, you can't do that. But there we go. The max calc is fine, Alex. Joshua W. The max calc is fine, Alex. Let the system get used to it for a couple of weeks, then push ALK up until you get the pH you want, i.e. the pH is 8.5 at 7.5. Ooh. Or go 8.5 or 9. That's not a bad point, actually, to be fair. So first off, you're right. You're probably right that I'll see how it goes, and I'm complaining that I've reached my peak already, and I've only been doing it for 3 days. And I hope I've made it clear that this is early days, and I'm not expecting it necessarily. Although I'm disappointed, I know I'm early days, so don't listen to me too much on that. But yeah, very good point. Maybe in a couple of weeks' time it'll be better. But this is one thing you mentioned is buffering your alkalinity up. I've wondered whether that would work, because if I bumped my alkalinity up, then I'm adding more dosing liquids, and that is going to increase my pH. But I think that will mean that will be a temporary boost, because then I'll be adding the same amount all along to keep it at that. So if I was to add 100 milliliters a day to keep it at 7 DKH, I'd have to increase that to get it to 8. But I think I would still be adding 100 milliliters to keep it at 8. I don't know if those maths are right. You seem to be suggesting that's not the case. I don't know. But again, these little tweaks like that, these feel like the finer things. And I don't want to be playing around with trying to squeeze every last ounce out of it. But it's an idea. It might work. Who knows? What is the difference between slurry, Kalkwasser, and sodium hydroxide? Okay, so Kalkwasser is calcium hydroxide, and it's lime water. You just get a tiny bit of powder, you mix it into a bit of water, and it's a very weak concentration. Not much of it will dissolve, but you dose that into your tank. That's Kalkwasser, calcium hydroxide. Calc slurry is because if you've got 4 liters of water, you can only dissolve 3 grams of Kalkwasser, calcium hydroxide. You can only dissolve 3 grams, hardly any, in 4 liters of water. So calc slurry is when you chuck a load more in, say 100 grams for the sake of argument, and then 3 grams of that will dissolve. The other 97 grams don't. And if you're stirring that, it forms this slurry sludge at the bottom, and it will probably, if you're stirring it up loads, I don't know if that's how you do it, but if you stir it up loads, the whole water is clogged with, or there's floating particles around. So that's what calc slurry is. The downside of that, from what I understand, is that anything, the idea with Kalkwasser is that any of the nasties will settle out, so you won't be dosing that. And actually, that's just reminded me of something. So you won't be dosing the nasties like arsenic. I don't know how true that is, and the fact that Jim Graham has been dosing slurry for 9 months, probably, and he's very open with the tank. He shows you everything. Probably shows that in his case it's not a problem. But that's one of the downsides of calc slurry. And one thing that makes, even though he's had fantastic results, I want to see 100 people try that method, and then they will all have slightly different ways of doing it. They'll make slightly different mistakes, and then I want to know how people get on with that. I don't just want to see one person with success. I'm still tempted. Anyway, that's one thing I wanted to pick up on. I'm going to try not to drip this stuff all over my mouse mount. So this is my my dosing tube for my calc thing, and you can see at the end, oops, don't drip, that I've put a little 90-degree angle on the end, and that is because I don't want it to suck up any undissolved Kalkwasser that will be sitting right on the bottom of my container. And as you can see, probably a couple of milliliters, that will sit a couple of milliliters off the surface of off the bottom of the container. So that's the difference between Kalkwasser and slurry. Slurry is Kalkwasser slurry. Sodium hydroxide is different from calcium hydroxide, calcium and sodium, in that it is, I don't know the exact ins and outs. I am very much not a scientist, but ultimately is a lot more potent. I think Alfredo said it was 24 times more potent, but whatever it is a lot more potent than Kalkwasser, calcium hydroxide. So it will have a much more significant effect on your pH, and I wouldn't need to dose 4 liters a day. I'd need to dose half a liter or whatever. But if you've ever seen Fight Club, and if you haven't, I'll show you Fight Club chemical burn. So what they do in Fight Club is they use sodium hydroxide to give you a proper burn. So this is a sodium hydroxide burn. I mean, I don't know if this is that's obviously like a fake chemical burn sticker, but in theory that's what it can do. So that's the sort of thing that puts me off. Realistically, you'd have to rub that on your skin to get that effect, but that's what sodium hydroxide is. It's a much more potent chemical. It's a really interesting one, but for everyday home use, I don't know if you want something that strong knocking around your house. Even like I opened my Kalkwasser tub, it had a little poof out and my cat was around, and I suddenly thought, don't want my cat breathing that in, and I certainly wouldn't want my cat breathing sodium hydroxide in. But there you go. You guys are all saying what Josh W said. That was about bumping your calc level up. Worth a shot. But again, I'm not massively keen on that, but worth a shot. So Avelino Fernandez Jr., the guy from ACI, Chris Meckley, said he uses 6 grams per gallon. Wonder if he uses vinegar or something, because you can add vinegar to it to dissolve more, because that's an acid which reduces the pH or something. I don't know how it works, but it does it. Interesting. That's not the instructions that my tub say, and it's calcium hydroxide is calcium hydroxide as far as I'm concerned. But I don't know. Maybe it's slightly different. Whatever. It's very little. Leonard R is joining in on the debate about evaporation. Warm air holds humidity, so less evaporation in warm air. See, that makes sense to me. That makes sense to me. And actually, I think we now have 3 votes for less evap in the summer against 1. Sorry, Puscheck, you've been outvoted. And this is not, we're not looking for facts, we're looking for votes. So that's how it works here. That's what you said on the Reef Dudes video. This is the 6 gram point. Okay, very well. Either way, it's not an awful lot. Chris Meckley knows a lot more about calcium hydroxide than I do. Yes, Sammy D. I have heard about Chummingham's Reef discussing pH. If you haven't seen it, it was on the Reef Dudes video. Chummingham Reef. This guy is a weird tank. It's in like this. It's not a traditional tank. It's just this massive vat, basically, a glass vat in the middle of a room. But my God, it is an impressive tank. And he talked about what he does with pH. I forget the ins and outs of it, but he basically runs, Bahama Llama corals, you're right. No, I think it was, he showed his tank on Bahama Llama, and he talked about it in more detail on Reef Dudes. But yeah, what was he doing? He was doing something a little bit different. I think he was interested in pegging his pH, and he didn't care what the alkalinity was. But there were various things that he did differently, but well worth a watch, because I wouldn't necessarily, with any one person, and I include myself in this, I wouldn't necessarily say, well, it's worked for him, therefore it'll work for me. But well worth a watch, and there was some interesting stuff there, and that guy has the tank to back it up for sure. And you underestimate your fans' motivation to watch anything you put up. Yeah, that's a reference to the fan video, I guess. But yeah, a very small percentage of you would do, and I'm like that. There are the channels that I obsess about. They can put up any old nonsense, and I'll watch it. But anyway, Husey, how do you look at the development of marine aquariums in the world, in the CIS countries and Russia? Well, Russia's got bigger issues at the moment, and that's a broad question, Husey, and I'm going to dodge it and answer a question about Kalkwasser instead. You can't mix calc with salt water. You wouldn't want to anyway, because you just end up increasing your salinity. But there you go. I didn't know that. Oh, I guess because the water is already saturated with salt, sodium. Anyway, whatever. You'd never want to do that. You'd only want to mix it with, what's it called? RO, fresh water. Ollie has been using it for 7 months. Growth and polyp extension increased exponentially, but I now have problems keeping phosphates detectable. That is a problem I would love to have. I'm just whacking a load more food, and I would be happy as Larry with that. But interesting that it has such a strong effect. And mine has had an impact on phosphate, but maybe because I'm only a week in, I've got more to come still. Good news. So actually, do you know what? On the point of growth increasing exponentially, I have taken a number of photos that I'm going to pull up, although they're not on there annoyingly. Where did I put them? I put them on Ultimate Reef. If you, by the way, guys, if you, I don't tend to update my tank, do updates on my tank very often. If you want to follow my tank journey, the place I do update it on is a forum in the UK called Ultimate Reef, and I'll bring it up now so you can see it. I update it all the time on there because I like Ultimate Reef. So here are a few photos I've taken, because you mentioned exponential growth, and I'm going to track it. So I've taken, unfortunately, I didn't get to take photos at the start of the week, but this is a week in, so no real impact. And these are the photos I've taken of some of my corals. This is a Aquapora Donii, something like that, which is actually really based out, so probably will grow quite quickly. This is a Millie, hot pink minipora, and is nice and small, so should be a good one to measure it by. This is a tenuous, very small Aquapora tenuous, and this is another, this is a Sunset Millie. And then we've got another tenuous, really nice bright pink tenuous, very small flag, so that's a good one to measure it by. That is an Aquapora hyacinthus that is looking a bit sad. It's looking a bit, that's much brighter and pinker when it's looking its best, and I think that's my phosphate. I digress. That is a phallic looking coral, isn't it? Christ, I'm going to get demonetized from YouTube for this. That is another tenuous, rainbow tenuous. I think it might be a home wrecker actually, but whatever. That is another tenuous. This is a really nice one actually. I like this one a lot. This one I got from a guy in what's his name, Ray in Reading. Hi Ray, if you're watching. He's got a room. His living room is full of fish tanks. It's wicked. This is a PC rainbow that's lost a bit of its color, probably because of high phosphate. And this is the tiniest little excuse for a nubbin. That's a really good one, because this one is already just started to base out. So this will be a really good one to see how much my growth increases. This has got some daft name, I can't remember what it is. This is a Pikachu. And again, you can see that's just basing out around a bit of algae there. That's basing out a little bit. So that'll be a good one to monitor. And then we're back to the tenuous. And this is a coral I fragged the other day. I can't remember what that's called. And this is, oh, Doug, this is from your farm, by the way. I got it via someone else, a guy called David Hughes. And this was a St. Clementines, I think, but it's lovely. So these are all the photos I've taken. And this is what was sold to me as a home wrecker. It might not be, but whatever. It's a nice tenuous. So all of those photos I've taken with the intention of seeing how things get on. So you say you've got exponential growth. I will show you how my growth progresses over the weeks and months. So make sure you subscribe so you don't miss out. But yeah, the trouble with this is I don't have a frame of reference, and I'll be making other changes. So I'm about to change my lights. Don't tell anyone. I'm keeping it a secret. So that will affect things. I'm probably going to decrease my phosphate. I've been saying that for about 2 years, mind. So I'm going to be making other changes. So I won't be able to say this is all down to the Kalkwasser and the pH. But nonetheless, I'll try to give you my impression of how much better the growth is or worse than before I started doing it. So there you go. Yeah, Dave Slaney, boost your calc saturation with vinegar to increase your pH dose in the same amount. Will you get above 8.3? I don't want to do that. Again, I don't want to start messing around with, I just want to do the calc and I don't want to be tweaking with the extra 5%ers. That's effort for me, and part of the attraction for Calc is that it's so easy. So yeah, Pushcheck laughing at the old evaporation. Sorry, mate. There's questions, loads of questions about new tanks and all that sort of stuff. I'm not going to go into it because it's not Calc. Sorry, I love answering questions sort of live face to face, but I'm trying to keep this about Calc. So really sorry, but I'm not going to go for that. Although we're nearly at the end. So Phil Hulks talks about Chummingham's Reef. I think Chummingham Reef had several tanks running different light periods over a 24-hour period to balance pH. Might well be one of them. He had they were all connected to the same system, weren't they? There was one that was a load of scullies and acantophilias, but that's interesting. I have thought about putting corals in my refugium and packing it in, but I assume no one, if that was a genius idea, someone would have done it by now. And I suspect that you get more photosynthesis out of chaeto algae than corals, but it would be cool. How cool would it be to have a refugium filled with Hystrix or Xenia or whatever? Xenia would escape into your main tank, so maybe not the best idea. But, economical reefer, you can try recirculating your CO2 scrubber and dose Calc. I don't like the idea of a recirculating CO2 scrubber. It takes up too much space, and CO2 scrubbers aren't for me. They work and they have their purpose, but I don't like them. I think if I had more space, I might do it, but I don't like that personally. Paul, evening, you're asking me why I'm changing my lights. Because I'm a tart and I'm a moron. I've had the same lights for a while, and I actually threw away the boxes. I bought them brand new. I threw away the boxes for them because I was like, I'm going to stick with them. I really should. But all will become clear in the future. And I'll save that for another day. We're more or less at the end. HCB chemistry is in the house. Good evening. And we've got another comment about adding vinegar to Calc will lead to carbon dosing, which will help reduce PO4, and NO3. PO4? That's that one is called? I can't remember now. NO3, PO4. Yeah, PO4. Anyway, yeah, I suppose so. Yeah, I don't like the idea of that personally, but yeah, there you go. I sent some sponsored Reef Factory lights. Ian, you cynic. No, actually, it's not going to be Reef Factory. I really like the Reef flare that I've got on my water box. But anyone who watches the channel regularly will know what lights I'm going to go for, because I go into this weird, like, catatonic, zoned out state when I start talking about them. But no, it's not Reef Factory lights. I think they were interested in giving me lights for my main tank, because it's good marketing for them, I guess. So I think if I'd have asked them, or if I'd have left it a couple of months, they might have offered. I don't know. Maybe I'm reading too much into that, but they're not quite for me, because I can't tell you why just yet. They're great, really are genuinely good, but they're not perfect, and I want perfection. Okay, Rebecca Hodges, you've missed the start, but you've caught the end, and this really is the end. I'm going to wrap up any minute. Missed the start of this. Did you want to start dosing Calc to raise your pH? 100%. Yes, I did. The trough was 7.7 and the peak was 8.08. I wanted to raise the trough, raise the peak, and close the gap as well, so it doesn't swing quite so much. There you go. And that is the end of the questions. So if anybody else has any more questions, chuck them in now, because I'm going to wrap up soon, because it's 9:30 and the plan was for this to be 45 minutes, maybe an hour. But I am going to keep it to an hour and a half, and I think I've told you everything I need to about Kalkwasser. I'll just looking, so I've checked all the photos, all that sort of stuff, all done, and I think we're gonna call it a night there. So thank you guys for joining. No, not just yet. You know what? So next week I'm not going to be doing an update on Calc. I'm going to be doing more updates on Calc. This series is going to keep running. Probably ease off a little bit because I'll leave it for a bit more time. I'm checking in every week. Not going to be learning an awful lot. I'm going to try to get more people on, guests, to talk about Calc, and I'll come back in a month or so when I've got more. Next week is, I think I'm going to be doing my first ever sponsored live stream, which will be an RO filter company. So I'll be talking about the RO filter I bought from them, and it's wicked. But yeah, I'll keep going on this. You gave away, no, I did. Well, I kind of did, Andy. Gave away your light choice on UR. So I bought one of the components of the light on UR, and I think you could put 2 and 2 together and guess one of the other components, and maybe you could guess the third. But yeah, I've not left. To be fair, I've not left much of the imagination though. I'm really enjoying your live streams. Thank you for taking the time to do them. Good. I'm glad you are. I really want to keep doing these, and I find them really enjoyable. It's great replying to comments on the channel, but it's totally different, and this is so much better engaging and having a back and forth and all that sort of stuff. So I really enjoy it. So I'll keep it up. More great streams and all that sort of stuff. And I've got one last. You get this because you do a Wayne's World reference. And I love Wayne's World. I switched to Neptune Sky 6 months ago. Corals be like, showing. There you go. I'm not a fan of the Neptune skies because there's no shimmer. And the same for any lights that don't have shimmer, like the ATI Straton, which looked awesome, but it doesn't have any shimmer, which is a shame. Economical reefer, you make an excellent point. Overall, keep it simple in reefing, and that's what I like about Calc. It is really simple, but yeah, keep it simple. It's the basics that you need to follow to have success. Anyway, we are definitely at an end here. Thank you all for joining. I will see you next week for the RO filter live stream, and I will be back again with more guests and more Kalkwasser chat and more general reefing chat in the coming weeks. Thank you. Good night.